The subject this morning that we're going to be discussing is signs and lying wonders. If you've been through the series with us so far, you'll understand that we've been coloring in this picture for some time. And some of the information that has been discussed has been pretty shocking. I did warn you at the beginning of the lecture series that we'll be fueling a plane. We'll be trimming the wings and checking that we've got enough fuel, etc., etc. We'll be building a biblical foundation on which we will then take off on a journey. Sometimes, especially when you're taking off, you hit some turbulence. And in mid-air as well, it's not the most comfortable ride to be in. What we're doing at the moment is, through the turbulence and as we're uncovering all these various topics, we're busy preparing to land back on the Word of God. We're going to be putting all of this into context. But we're not there yet. And we don't want to land in the sea. So we need to make sure that we get to our destination before we land. We're going to be continuing on with this idea of what's going on inside Christianity. Is there any way that Satan can deceive Christians to believing things that are false, which are actually true? I showed you yesterday out of the Word the effects of some of these deceptions. Firstly, how the Word has been changed. Also, the idea of you can eat anything that you want to. On top of that, we looked into hell, and then we looked into the secret rapture. Now, we're going to today, in this lecture, look into where do we find most of those doctrines. We find them in what is today also called Protestantism, but is often not recognized as such by its deeds and what the doctrines are that it fulfills. Signs and lying wonders. This is an interesting topic, and we're going to build on what we started yesterday. Do you remember I showed you the graphic of Francisco Ribera and Alcazar, the two Jesuits that took the heat of the papacy by throwing the papacy into the past, or at least the Antichrist into the past, at the time of Nero, and Ribera who shot it into the future and threw it to some post-rapture period of 3.5 years? That these two ideas were placed there to be able to take the heat off the Antichrist? Well, Ribera specifically, this Jesuit priest, his doctrines were continued or followed up by another Jesuit priest, Manuel de la Cunza. We looked at him yesterday, and we saw that he was a Protestant or a Jesuit that was hiding inside Protestantism, claiming to be a converted Jew, Rabbi Ben Ezra. And as Rabbi Ben Ezra, this converted Jew, he wrote this book which was absorbed by Edward Irving. And Edward Irving used this and the experiences from Margaret MacDonald to base the belief and the founding of the reappearance of apostles, prophets, speaking in tongues, etc., etc. And that Edward Irving doctrine is now found in many of the Pentecostal and charismatic churches around the world. Edward Irving wrote that book, a continuation of this Johann Josaphat Ben Ezra, about the coming of the Messiah in glory and majesty. Edward Irving is the acknowledged forerunner, according to Dave McPherson, of both Pentecostal and charismatic movements. And it was in 1830, at the age of 15, that Margaret MacDonald had visions about the end time. Norton published her revelation again in the Restoration of the Apostles and the Prophets in the Catholic Apostolic Church. And for the New Apostolics, I explained yesterday that this is also the organization that led to the schism after schism after schism, which led to the New Apostolic Church, which is the organization or the denomination I was born into. And having to trace back history, you start to realize where the truths of the doctrines come from, and it's not necessarily from the Bible. Edward Irving founded the Catholic Apostolic Church, and according to the birth of the pre-tribulation doctrine in the 1800s, he said he had also had in his church at the time a restoration of prophecy, tongues, and other manifestations. And the futuristic school of Bible prophecy came from the Roman Catholic Church, specifically her Jesuit theologians. That was a background. Now we're going to continue on with this path this morning. I remind you what Matthew 24 verse 4 says. And Jesus answered them and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Revelation 13, 11 and 12 is critical to this lecture. Read it with me. It says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all power of the first beast before him. And he causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Here's a second beast arising out of the earth. And this second beast causes the whole world to worship the first beast, who was the Antichrist beast, the papacy." I'll get into that in the next lecture. This continues in verse 13 of chapter 13. It says, "And he performed great miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of men. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth." So here is a second beast that comes out of the earth, and somehow will be associated to miraculous signs, and will not only drive the world to acknowledge the first beast and worship the first beast, but through miracles and signs and lying wonders will be able to deceive mankind. This is explained in 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 7 to 9. It says, "For the mystery of iniquity doth already work." That's the Antichrist. "Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way, and then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders." This is what we're looking at this morning. How is he going to use power and signs and lying wonders? Revelation 16 verse 13 and 14 say, "I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles." Here the Bible explains that mystic Babylon has 3 components. Firstly, the dragon, we know who that is. That's Satan. The beast, we know who that is. That's the Antichrist beast, who's the papacy or the Roman Catholic Church. And the false prophet. Who's the false prophet? Somehow this false prophet is associated to the second beast that comes out of the earth. Well, Revelation 19 verse 20 says, "And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone." Just as the example is in Matthew, where it'll be as it was in the days of Noah, when the wicked were taken away, the flood came and took them all away. Here, the beast is taken, and along with him the false prophet. And they were cast into the lake of fire. So there's 3 aspects: the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. We've covered the dragon, we've covered the Antichrist beast. Who's this false prophet? Let's go into that. We know by just looking around us that the foundations of the Pentecostal and charismatic movements, and from what we've read and the quotations that we've seen, we know that this is founded, the foundations of the Pentecostal and charismatic movements are founded on Jesuit doctrines. In other words, lies, not on the Bible. But if that's the case, why is it so popular? Why is this so widely accepted around the world? Well, as always, we have to go back to the Roman Catholic Church and find out, is there some affiliation? Here's an image of the Pope being carried at the Vatican II, at the council, as they lifted him up above normal members, the cattle, the catechumen. Let's read what their own documents have to say. This is the physical movement in celebration. The participation in the celebration should be internal, but must be, on the other hand, external also. That is, such as to show the internal participation by gestures and bodily attitudes. Here the Vatican is explaining in Vatican II that from now on we must physically get involved in worship. No longer are we going to sit and read our Bible and make sure that what the pastor is saying is correct. From now on, we're going to drive an ideology into the Christian community that'll drive them to become more physically involved with their worship. The documents continue and they say that musical celebrations In the section on music and liturgy, we read